When you think about voice, you might be thinking about two different things: your author voice and your character voice. Your author voice is mostly automatic. It's gonna change over time as you get better at writing, but it's really just the way you make words happen. Whether that's your word choice or your syntax or the idioms and imagery that you use or just the rhythm of your words, this is the thing that's gonna make every work of fiction that you write kind of sound like you. Author voice is important. But regardless of how honed your author voice is, your characters also need a strong voice. It's something separate from you, an extra layer that will be added to each story that makes each story definitive. So in this video, I'm hoping to give you a crash course in all things character voice. We'll break down the elements of character voice, try and figure out what things you can do to make your character's voice good or strong. I'll share some exercises that will hopefully help you strengthen character voice in your own work, and then afterwards, if you want, you can share some of your favorite lines down in the comments. One final preface: this is all going to be most useful to you if you already have a chapter or a novel that's been drafted, a body of work that is already in existence that you can look at and tinker with. And there are reasons for that, which I will get into after the intro. Do I seem like one of those online teachers yet? Because that's all I want. Masterclass! All goofiness aside, I do have a lot of experience with character voice, and so I'm going to be bringing that into this video. There are a few books that I did most of my learning on character voice from, beyond just writing a lot. Those books are Imaginative Writing: The Elements of Craft, which was the book we used in my first ever creative writing class by Janet Burroway. Also Self-Editing for Fiction Writers by Rennie Brown and Dave King, a fantastic resource if you are finding yourself about to dive into the editing trenches. Highly recommend if there's no other book you're gonna get. This book covers everything you could possibly need to know. And then for more in-depth study, once you have kind of mastered all the basics, I highly recommend The Anatomy of Story by John Truby and The Emotional Craft of Fiction by Donald Mass. I'll put the titles of all these books down in the description as well if you want to grab them later. But I've studied these books so much in my own personal writing life, and so it's pretty highly likely that any exercises I give you today will be influenced by the things I learned from those books. Now that all that intro stuff is out of the way, let's dive in. So first of all, what is character voice? Obviously, I talked a little bit at the very beginning of the video about what it is. John Truby has a great definition of what character voice is on page 311 of his book. It says, "When we talk about letting the audience hear the character's voice, we are really putting the audience in the character's mind right now as he speaks. It is a mind expressed in the most precise and unique way possible, which is what the character talks about and how he says it. Being in the character's mind implies that this is a real person with prejudices, blind spots, and lies, even when he isn't aware of them himself. This character may or may not be trying to tell the truth to the audience, but whatever truth comes out will be highly subjective." Character voice goes beyond just prose. A good, strong voice is the lens through which your point of view character sees everything. So it's in the things they notice and the things they don't notice, or the things they ignore. It's in the things they say and the way they interact with every scene. For example, in These Broken Stars by Amy Kaufman and Meghan Spooner, there are two point of view characters. There's Tarver and Lilac. These two examples are the way that Tarver and Lilac walk into a room and notice what's around them on this spaceship. On page 3, Tarver says, "Even the air here smells filtered and fake. The candles in the sconces do flicker, but they're powered by a steady source. Hover trays weave among the guests like invisible waiters are carrying drinks. The string quartet is only a hologram, perfect and infallible and exactly the same at every performance. I'd give anything for a laid-back evening joking around with my platoon instead of being stuck here in this imitation scene from a historical novel." Conversely, on page 18, Lilac says, "We turn into the broad sweep of synthetic lawn that curves around the stern of the ship as the lights, timed to the ship's clocks, dim past sunset into dusk. The observation windows tint from their daytime image of a sunny sky and clouds through gold, orange, pink, and finally to a starry sky more brilliant than any you could find on a planet." So right off the bat, you can tell just from the way they look at the spaceship that they are from totally different backgrounds. You can tell that Tarver hates the spaceship and that Lilac loves it. You can tell from the cadence of her words and the length of her sentences that she might think kind of highly of herself and might have some education that has caused her to feel that way. Meanwhile, Tarver's mention of the platoon means that you know he's a military guy. He's not from there. It stations him as an outsider in this world that he considers to be frivolous and fake. And when reading this book, I didn't think to myself, Wow, that's a great example of voice. Excellent use of the word platoon. And that's the trickiest part of voice. You've only done your job really well if the reader doesn't notice it while they are reading the book for the first time. And because of how subtle it's supposed to be, it can be kind of difficult to find useful advice on writing character voice. A lot of times you'll get people who are like, well, read a lot of books and then you'll know. Which is true, like read a lot of books, it will be helpful, but I also don't think it does anyone a service to think that we can't break these things down and figure them out. So step 1, building the foundation of your character voice. You need to know who your character is. You don't need to know pages and pages of details, but you do need to know some basics. In the These Broken Stars example, Tarver is described as a young war hero who distrusts wealthy people, particularly wealthy women. Meanwhile, Lilac is the daughter of the richest man in the galaxy. Those are both such short descriptions, but they tell you a lot about how the characters would interact with each other if they were thrown in a room together, and also how they would interact maybe if they were just thrown into specific scenarios alone. And so now for exercise number 1. With these exercises, some are going to be useful to you, some are not. Take what is good and useful, leave what isn't. If you already know all this in this exercise, you don't have to do it. But I do find that in my own writing, doing exercise 1 helps me a lot, particularly after I've just finished a first draft where the point of view characters that I started with are probably not the same ones I ended with. But again, your mileage may vary. Write a short bio of your character. Be sure to include anything major that could affect their interactions with people and the world. These things could include their personality, age, education, values, beliefs, or important experiences. Really, the key to improving your voice is awareness. That's why I had you do exercise 1, because I want you to be aware of your character and the things that are going to influence how they interact with the world. This level of awareness that is needed is also why I recommend that you don't stress about voice in the drafting period. I know that when I personally focus on voice too early on, it is a surefire way to stall the draft and make me think that everything I'm writing is garbage, because in my own process, I don't fully know the characters until I've got a draft down. So don't worry about it. If you're first drafting, just write a chapter and then you can come back and look at this. The thing I love about first drafts is that no matter what you're writing, even if you think so much of it is a dumpster fire, you will have moments of strong voice that shine through that you're gonna love later. And those are the things that you need to have so that you can figure out things that are working and things that are not. But once you have something in front of you that you're gonna be doing these exercises with, welcome back. There are a lot of different things you can look for to help determine where your voice is strong. It could be in your character's personal thoughts. In the example, Tarver sees these fake things and wishes that he could be back with his platoon, which he considers something real. Maybe your character also has experiences or a profession that are gonna inform the things that they say or the memories that they refer back to. Maybe where they are from, people speak a certain way and it is slightly different from those people around them. Dialogue is actually a huge component of voice, probably enough that I could do a whole separate video on dialogue. But in short, your dialogue needs to be different for every character, but not so different that it's like, what are you doing? You're trying to make every character sound different. And so you've now put them in boxes of like the funny character, the sarcastic character, the quiet character. No person is a monolith. Every character is going to act differently in different situations. But if this is something that you are worried about and you want to work on more, I'll put some resources down in the description and also give you a little mini exercise. To help strengthen dialogue, I would recommend dissecting your work. Find a chapter where people are talking to one another and pull out just the dialogue. No tags, no nothing. When you read them back to back like that, can you tell who is saying what? If you think about it, could you infer who's saying which things? If not, look for subtle ways that you can tweak your dialogue so that that is a possibility. Jumping back into character voice as a whole, balance is the key and also the lock. It's the hardest thing to get right. And this is again why that awareness of your voice and character voice and all of those things is so important. If you try to make every single sentence convey voice, it's gonna be overkill. Sometimes your character just needs to cross the room. You don't have to tell me that the carpet feels just like their childhood home and they hated their childhood home, so they hate the carpet and it's putting them on edge. Sometimes they just need to go from one place to the other without causing drama. Really, I would say trust your gut on this. If there's a line that just, it makes your muscles sing and you're like, yes, that's it, keep it. If there's a line that kind of makes you maybe like scrunch your mouth or like tilt your head to the side a little bit, just any sort of pause, maybe consider reworking it or getting rid of it. And if the words seem to just kind of blur out and they're getting you more from plot point to plot point than necessarily making you feel something, that's fine too. Those words are just as necessary and important as the ones that make you feel very warm and fuzzy inside. Exercise number 2. Read a full scene or chapter from one point of view. If a line or description makes your body sing, highlight it. If it makes you hiccup or pause, underline it. Then try to diagnose what made you pause when you looked at the underlined sentences. Some common problems include they're trying too hard to sound good, so it either needs to be reworked or cut. The sentence is too vague, so you need to spice it up a little. It's awkwardly worded, so you need to repurpose some things. Or it's too obvious, a repetition, in which case it needs to be cut. I hope that exercise went well for you, that you were able to make some pretty sentences and admire some sentences that you had written that were already great. But there is a chance that that alone was not enough for you. Maybe this is a scene that you really need to pack a punch and you're just feeling like the voice isn't where it needs to be to create emotional resonance. If that's the case and you're just not sure what else to do, this exercise is for you. Exercise number 3, deconstruct your scene. Obviously do this in a separate file or on its own page because you don't want to delete anything useful, but really take apart this scene. Look at the place. What would your main character think about this location if they just showed up to it alone? You could write this out as actual prose. Your character is walking into this room and noticing and not noticing all the specific things. Or you could just make a list. What things would they fixate on? What things would they like? What things would they dislike? What things would not even cross their radar that are in that room? Then repeat this with any characters in the scene. Take your point of view character, put them in a white-walled nothing room with this other character. What things would they notice? What things would they like, dislike, all the same. Then look at the plot points. If your character was having these things happen to them in a completely neutral space, how would they react to it? And themselves. If you were to put your character in a room with a mirror at this exact point in their character arc, what would they think about themselves? What would they notice? What would they like? What would they dislike? Now look at them all together again. Was there anything that your character overlooked when they were in this scene all together? Anything that should set your main character on edge, or maybe the opposite, put them at ease? Your character's voice will come through in the things they ignore or focus on, or the ways they move around a room, just as much as your actual words on the page will. I know that this feels like a lot and like it's gonna take 7 lifetimes to finish revising your novel, but A, it's not. B, you'll get better and faster as time goes on. C, it will be worth the time spent working on your novel, but also D, like, don't do this for every single line on every single page, or like exercise 3 for every single scene in your entire book, because it's not necessary. Which leads me to the last point, which is, how much time do I have to spend on this to know that I've mastered voice in this particular project? Because if we're being real here, you could spend years and years working on it. Like, you could try and do exercise 3 on every single scene. But like, there must come a time in some sort of like law of diminishing returns of revisions where the hard work that you're putting in now outweighs the benefits that you are getting from doing that work. Again, this will be different for each person and only you are going to be able to decide for yourself. But I personally find that when I am so sick of revisions that I harken back to economics 101 principles, that I have probably hit my limit. This is the point when you need another set of eyes on your work. You may think you've mastered your character's voice, and you might be right, but the only way you can be 100% confident is if you have other trusted readers, writers, or professionals take a look at your work. Best of all, the people going over your work will probably have tips for improvement if you've missed something and you need to go back and tweak your character's voice a little bit more. I know that writing strong character voice can seem daunting, and some of the tips out there are a little too vague, but just like everything else in writing, you can dissect it and figure out how to make your own character's voice as strong as possible. I've included some more links and resources down in the description as well if you would like to further study character voice. If you did any of these exercises and came across or created a line in your book that just makes your heart sing and you think is such a good example of your character's voice, definitely share it down in the comments if you feel comfortable doing that. Additionally, if there's anything I missed or if there's any tips that you have that help strengthen your voice, definitely let me know those as well. I know my experience is not going to be universal, and so the more people's experiences that are shared, the better. Be sure to tune in this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our usual live chat. I cannot wait to see you all then, and until then, stay nerdy.